There was a time when art was about awe.
And in some ways it still is. The reverence you feel for Michelangelo's David may be just as strong as feeling cheated with Catalan's taped banana. Though the actual feeling is vastly different, perhaps the emotional response is just as present. So what changed besides the immediately observable stripping and simplification of the soul and complexity in these paintings and sculptures? At the heart of it, it comes down to meaning. In 1863, Edouard Manet painted Le Déjeuner sur l'herbe, considered the first piece of modern art. What made this movement different from before, as implied in the name, was its break from tradition, a rejection of authority, the exploration of different materials, and a redefinition of artistic purpose. Before modernism, the painter's purpose was similar to that of a photographer's. They documented reality, usually in a glorified way to serve their commissioners. Art would often convey a narrative or theme rooted in retelling historical events, religion, or myth. The Baroque and Renaissance centered around a divine soul. And afterwards, Neoclassicism and Romanticism portrayed figures with emotional or physical intensity. Overall, these movements had a tradition of idealism. The transition between realism and modern art didn't have a single cause. It was influenced by war, scientific discoveries, technological advances, especially with the invention of photography, which left realism obsolete. The early modernists were affected by the Franco-Prussian War of 1870. It left France unstable, and artists to reflect this uncertainty with their less idealized art. Impressionists, for instance, strayed away from grand themes and mostly focused on everyday life, using light to drive their work. Late modernism, which the internet likes to criticize the most, was influenced by the two world wars. After viewing mass destruction and really the extent of human atrocity, artists stopped following the traditional structures that led to the brutality. Instead, they embraced the absurd and the disorderly as a portrayal of the world at that time. In 1882, Nietzsche proclaimed in The Gay Science, "God is dead. He remains dead. And we have killed him." God, in this context, acts as a metaphor for the decline of Western religion. Without the guidance of a figure who can straightforwardly dictate one's life, give output to input, be good, go to heaven, a sense of significance wouldn't be up to a higher power or some other religion. To Nietzsche, this could lead to nihilism, a loss of faith, leading to apathy and despair. Religion in Western tradition was the foundation for meaning, as it provided a basis for morality, daily order, the purpose to serve God, etc. Whereas science and modernity, which emphasized logic and skepticism, would erode this absolutism. If religion gave a sense of purpose but was proven false, then you can see how that would cause a sense of hopelessness. The decline of religion was affected by the rise of scientific discovery. Darwin's On the Origin of Species debunked divine creation. Evolution proved that humans weren't intended or spiritually important. They did what they needed to do in order to adapt, unlike God who would predetermine purpose. Another observation I had was in regards to the rise of conceptual art in the 1960s and 70s, as that it acted like philosophy because it questioned the definitions of metaphysical concepts, especially in regards to what art is. In Ludwig Wittgenstein's Philosophical Investigations, published posthumously in 1957, he argues that philosophy's role should not be to define abstract metaphysical ideas, as it had been doing until the 19th-20th century, because language simply isn't the right mechanism to do so. It is a means meant for human communication and is thus influenced by our innate perception of each word's use in grammar. So it is not meant to uncover universal truths but rather be used in everyday life. Art, on the other hand, isn't bound by grammar definitions and at this point in time, strict rules. It is able to evoke and show an essence. Above all, these elements reflected how humanity was becoming more self-sufficient. With the plain and often bleak reality that they were facing at that time, traditional sources of truth became outdated. Without an external power, the responsibility fell onto the individual to decide what is good, beautiful, and worth living for. As philosophy began to confront this view, art followed. Instead of striving towards transcendence, it turned towards the everyday, personal experiences. As art imitates life, life imitates art. Once the ideas that are reflected in art are absorbed into the person, especially if the form is emotionally resonant, which art is, it is hard to forget. In the new movement where these artists gain prominence and popularity, the absorption of those ideas were internalized by the viewers and spread through the fabric of society. The message of the later modern art was absurdity. Urinals, soup cans, bananas were originally unextraordinary, meant to critique society and to explore the subjectivity of meaning. As of now, in the postmodern age, we are living in a time of irony and the commodification of identity, literally the thing that modern art opposed. So what happened? Duchamp's urinal was so shocking because it was so ordinary. Yet it was declared art nevertheless. This was revolutionary because it forced the viewer to confront mundanity. Over time, institutions recognized it too. The work was put into museums to display its glory, the opposite of its initial message of plainness. Its controversy became aestheticized and profitable. In other words, it was integrated into the very system it opposed. And this is the trouble with irony. Conceptual art used absurdly usual things to question traditional ideas. When it is then praised, the ordinary becomes the extraordinary, and rebellion becomes a trend. The dull becomes duller because of this desensitization. In the end, modern art reshaped how we understand beauty and life. What once broke from the tradition is now a part of it. When artists turn to the ordinary, they reveal that there is beauty in the everyday. That is the spirit of this channel. Through each piece, I aim to resensitize the mundane, and to reactivate what has been numbed through reinstitutionalization and conditioning. The extraordinary used to be statues, oil paintings, and toilets. With the fragmentation of all these eras, except for our immediate surroundings. So find beauty in sidewalks, grocery aisles, and quiet mornings. There is glory in the ordinary.